the Market Musings podcast.
Hello and welcome to Stockbox. Now, of course, we do like to bring you different content, and that's exactly what I'm doing today. I have with me the CEO of Ananda Developments PLC. We have Melissa Sturgis. How are you doing, Melissa?
I'm very well, Pam, and it's great to chat to you.
Oh, it's great to chat to you as well. Now, I did just say then, Melissa, that I like to bring different content to the platform because when we met, we had quite an interesting meeting, I would say. We met at the Aquis event that has just happened a couple of weeks ago in London. And of course, you know, you were there representing Ananda, of course, with Jeremy. And when we met, you actually straight away, this is a room full of men, very few women here. You said to me, do you invest? And I said, I was a bit like a rabbit in headlights, actually. I was like, I don't. And then you said, right, follow me. And you marched me over to the IG stand and said, well, you need to sign up. You need to invest. And I thought, do you know, you seem remarkable. I would love to hear more about your investing story. And of course, over time, we can explore different ways to invest because I have to admit, I've never invested. I don't know how to invest, what to do. And I was just fascinated by your passion no, we should all be investing. We should all be independent. And many of us, I mean, like myself, I tend to think my husband does the investing. It's okay. I don't need to think about it. I leave it to him. But then you ignited something in me. You inspired something in me. So here I am with my IG mug. That I picked up on the day.
Good first step.
Yes. And that's as far as I've got, I have to admit.
That's what I was suspicious. But you did walk into my trap because you opened by saying, I'm fascinated with what you're doing at Ananda because I have a background in wellness and healthcare and media.
That's right.
I said, well, if you have that background, especially healthcare, and you're interested in what we're doing, maybe you should be a shareholder. And that's when you said, well, I don't invest. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. And that's obviously my little, my sort of passion project alongside Ananda, which is my big passion project. But my little passion project is getting more women investing.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, Melissa, do you know what? I think I would love to hear more about your investing journey. But before we do, let's just speak a little bit about Ananda because that's another subject that we spoke about on the day. And I was really fascinated by what you are doing because, of course, you're doing clinical trials currently for the treatment of endometriosis. And of course, as you just said then, and as I said when we first met, I do have a background in healthcare and well-being as well. So I know the importance of this. I know how this condition can affect so many people. So I think it's great what you're doing. Just tell me a little bit about Ananda and when did you start with Ananda?
So we listed the company in 2018, and really what we've done is separate the over-the-counter CBD oil that you can buy online or in a pharmacy from developing drugs that are based on CBD that can be prescribed by specialists. And ultimately, our ambition is to be prescribed on the NHS. So that's really what we've done is separate over-the-counter from the pharmaceutical drug development pathway, if you like. We are looking at endometriosis. So we have a phase 2 trial, which we hope will start dosing in 2025, so next year. And that is being run by clinicians at Edinburgh University. A phase 2 trial means that it is in humans. So it is looking at our particular CBD oil in a very organised and disciplined fashion so that we can collect really precise data, which would help us ultimately turn our CBD drug candidate, which is called MRX1, into a drug that can then be prescribed on the NHS for women who suffer from endometriosis. We're also doing work in a couple of other conditions. We're doing work in epilepsies and we're doing work in chemotherapy-induced pain. But I think it was sort of the endometriosis angle or story was what you and I sort of picked up on about women's health, your understanding of health. Why wouldn't you be a really good potential shareholder for Ananda from my perspective? And from your perspective, wouldn't that be an interesting investment or something for you to get involved in as a shareholder, to be involved in a journey like the one we're on in Ananda?
Indeed. And you just mentioned then that you're in phase 2 of clinical trials. What do you have a timeline on that? Do you know when they're due to be completed?
So if we start dosing next year, the actual trial period is only a matter of months. So the actual dosing of the patients doesn't take very long. It's actually all the work beforehand and all the work afterwards. So the work at the beginning before the trial starts is all about getting the drug into a very standardized formulation so that if I would prefer to say when it becomes a drug that's available on the NHS, the prescribers know that it is going to be exactly the same every time it is dosed in a patient. So there's a whole lot of really technical lab work that is done. I don't even begin to understand it, but I know it has to be done, and we have a great team that's doing it. So there's all that pre-work. And then there's the trial period where women are dosed with CBD or they're dosed with a placebo, so something that doesn't have anything in it, and we compare the two. And afterwards, there's statistics. Lots and lots and lots of stats, and then all the reporting is done. So overall, we're looking at, the whole period will be more than a year. So, but the actual dosing bit, the sort of exciting bit, I suppose, is actually quite a small bit of it. It's all the stuff around it. That's the stuff that takes time, and that's the stuff that takes the financial investment, because you've got to get all that other stuff right. Otherwise, the dosing doesn't really mean anything.
Yes, indeed. And then once that's completed, then you can start going out to pitching to the NHS, is it? For them to see if this is something that they will take on?
Yeah, so that drug development pathway can take a number of routes. Once we do this first round of research in patients, depending on the results, we might have to do more patients. So we might have to do another trial, another study with more patients. So the first one is going to be 100 women. So we might be asked to do something wider across more centres throughout the UK, so we get a better representation of women across vast number of communities rather than a small number of communities, which is what's happening in this first trial. Alongside that, yes, that NHS work is really crucial. So there are really two parts to that. One is the regulatory pathway, which is what do we have to do to get a drug approved, and that is all about its efficacy. So how well does it work? How well does it treat endometriosis symptoms? So pain, it being the main one that we'll be measuring. The other pathway in the UK is absolutely crucial, is the health economics. So the drug not only has to work, but it also then has to be affordable for it to be prescribed on the NHS. Yes. So there are two parts to that, and we've started both of those work streams, we call them internally. We've started both of those work streams. So whilst we're doing the trials, we're also talking to our regulatory consultants, our pricing consultants, to say, well, what results do we need to get in both of those areas for us to be able to progress to the next stage of developing the drug? So some of it is a bit exploratory. You sort of have to feel your way, and other parts of the program are really us targeting a defined outcome so that we know that will tick a box, and then we can move forward. And I've learned all of this on the fly. I'm not a pharmaceutical person, so my language tends to be non-pharma. So for anyone who comes from a very technical space, I apologise.
But for investors watching right now, which of course is the majority of our audience, not the pharma audience, so you're okay there, Melissa. What would you say in terms of? This is a huge industry financially. Can you give us some figures at all in terms of?
That's a really good point. So endometriosis, in terms of sufferers, 1 in 10 women suffer from endometriosis, and the pathway in the UK alone to be diagnosed is about 8 to 10 years. So the health burden of women who are suffering, and the healthcare burden and the broader economic burden, I read the other day, I think it's something like £5 billion a year in terms of not going to work, not being able to function properly, all of those sort of life issues alongside the actual suffering of the woman who has endometriosis. So that number is huge, and there are 1 in 10 women suffering, and that's a global number. So the population, or the potential for us to put a drug into the system that can be useful in that population is absolutely massive. If we sort of look at the other side, which is what do CBD drugs do? The best example is GW Pharmaceuticals, which developed one drug for 3 rare forms of epilepsy. So GW Pharmaceuticals developed a CBD drug, very similar pathway to the pathway we are on, and that drug will do $1 billion of revenue in 2025. So it will officially become a blockbuster drug in the definition of blockbuster drugs next year, which is unbelievable. What is fascinating is that it is the only licensed CBD drug in the world, and it is for 3 rare forms of epilepsy. But in the US, that particular drug is also being prescribed by specialists for conditions other than those 3 rare forms of epilepsy. So next year, about $400 million will be on conditions that aren't those 3 forms of epilepsy. If I break that down one more level, about 200 million of that is being prescribed for things like anxiety, pain, low mood, all of the symptoms and conditions associated with something like endometriosis. So in my mind, I sort of match the two. I think, well, on the one hand, we've got 1 in 10 women. We've got this incredible burden on the healthcare system and society generally. On the other hand, we know that even off license, so not even according to the license for Epidiolex in the US alone, we're going to see about $200 million of revenue for that drug next year. If I put those two things together, we will continue. I mean, the prize is very big.
Yeah.
I always put it in terms of the prize is very big for patients and very big for shareholders.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
yeah.
It's a huge industry. And as you just mentioned, then it's a growing industry as well.
Yeah.
I do think, of course, with my background as well, and having watched this space, I think that this industry is looking to just grow in a way that we cannot even fathom right now.
Yeah.
So really exciting to hear about your developments there with Ananda and how that's going. But Melissa, let's bring it back to you and your investing journey, because I would love to know, when did you start investing? How long ago was it? What made you want to invest in your own right? What was your beginning story? How did it start?
Well, it began probably 28 years ago, so a long time ago, when I first got involved in capital markets in metals and mining. So my background is metals and mining, and I got involved in some small junior mining exploration companies in Australia. Obviously, my accent's Australian. I've been in the UK for many, many, many years. But I started in Australia, and I was working in a number of small mining companies, and they were all listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Some were dual listed on the Australian Stock Exchange and on AIM, the alternative investment market in London. And so I suppose I was just in that arena. And where I started with those companies, so my undergraduate degree is psychology and statistics, and then I have an MBA in corporate finance. But I'm not a geologist or anything in particular, sort of a generalist. But I started to see that there was money to be made, and there was money being made, mainly by men, but I didn't really think about that. I just could see that money was being made by investing in small mining companies. So I had that proximity to start. So I suppose that was the easy leap for me, was that I was in an area where people were investing and making money from investing in mining companies. And I was fascinated. I've always been a tomboy, so I was fascinated by mining. I love engineering. I love plants. I love going underground, deep in mines. So I didn't really think about it. It was just, that's what everyone did. So And of course, because I was involved in these little mining companies, I had the luxury of meeting stockbrokers. So I was
Yes.
meeting stockbrokers. And in those days, when regulation wasn't as tight, stockbrokers, the relationship was sort of seemed to be easier than it possibly is now. So I was able to open a broking account and just started. Really, not as much thought went into it as, well, I admit that not very much thought went into it. I just started doing it.
Yeah, you just started. And
Yeah.
can I ask you, how much did you start with?
I can't remember, but not a lot of money. And it's one of the points of feedback I've had when I've talked to women about investing now, when I've had women follow me and say, "Oh, it's amazing what you're doing in Ananda. When I've got some money, I'll invest." And I go, "You don't need to get some money. What do you mean by when I've got some money?" "Oh, £5,000. No, you don't need £5,000. You just need a broking account and you need to link a bank account to your broking account." This is the lecture I gave you. You need to link a broking account to your bank account, but you don't have to transfer any money and no money will be taken. So it's just a link. And then if you want to buy something, you can literally buy £20 worth of shares, £50 worth of shares, £100. You don't have to invest a large chunk. You can just start with whatever makes you feel comfortable. My son is used to me saying that it's your coffee money. If you went without a couple of coffees a week, have one more coffee before you leave home and one less coffee when you're at work, then you've probably got enough to then start saying, okay, what interests me? Maybe I can buy some shares in something.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, because that's a bit of a myth buster there, really, because even myself, again, having not invested beforehand, I would think you need hundreds, maybe thousands to get started. But what you're actually saying is, no, you just need a bank account linked to a broker's account. And from there, you can invest even £20, £50, £100, whatever is available, whatever is affordable. And it's interesting to hear you say that, because I'm assuming then that as you hopefully as a person profits on that investment, then they can reinvest and start to grow it. But I mean, one of the things that somebody like me would think is, but what if it goes the other way? What if a person was to lose money? I mean, would you just lose what you've invested, or could you go further into debt than that? How does it work?
Yeah, no, you can only lose the money you've invested. And that's a really good point, because I think certainly the area in which I operate mostly, so something like Ananda, these are high risk, high return opportunities, shall we say. And I'm not an investment advisor, so nothing I say should be taken as investment advice at all. But they are high risk, and that's sort of in a way the fun of it. I think we all have a pension pot somewhere. So there's a pension contribution we make, which is the safe part of our savings plan for our future and for our own retirements. And then I put this and the conversations we've had into the category of, I sort of put this into the category of what I call punting. So, you see something that looks interesting and exciting, and you might feel some personal affinity to it. And so you think, well, if this works, it'll work really well, or I might lose all my money, but I can't lose more than I've put in. So the downside, I suppose, is limited. And in that way, my little check to myself is always, well, can I afford to lose this money? And if it's money that I otherwise would have spent on coffee or fast fashion, then the answer is probably yes. So if I feel that I can, that's my sort of internal monitor, if you like, is should I invest something in the market or fast fashion or coffee? That's kind of the trade-off. And so to me, that's how I assess the risk. And I go, yep, let's put a little bit in the market. Let's go and buy something that might be interesting. Yep.
Interesting. And so let's bring it back to when you first started investing.
Yeah.
How did you know? I mean, I know you mentioned that you were in those circles, you knew you brokers, but were you advised on stock to pick initially, or did you just think, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to put a little bit of money into that? How did it happen? How did you initially make your picks, and you're happy to. Can you disclose what they were?
Yeah, I won't disclose what they were, but they were all in the area that I was working. So they were all in junior mining. And where I would look for what I would call, opportunities would be I would read the business section of the paper and look at what was happening to metal prices. So if I could see lots of good commentary on gold, for example, I think, okay, well, let's find a company that's doing something really, exciting, looking to explore gold somewhere, or they're in an area where a lot of gold's been found and someone gets some mining leases nearby and they're exploring and they've raised some money, so they've got some money and they're going to do a drilling program or something like that. I think, okay, well, maybe that's a punt. So we'll sort of learn from the press. So looking at the press, I had the benefit in that time of being around other small companies. So I would also hear through the grapevine what other guys, always guys, were doing with other small mining companies. So that was how I first started, was a combination of sort of just watching other people and what they were doing in their businesses and reading the financial press. And even these days, I suppose you wouldn't even have to read the financial press, because if you had interests wider than my very narrow mining interests, you could look at what was happening in supermarket chains or a CBD drinks brand, or a new, a gluten-free bread that might be released by a company that is stock market, has a quote on a stock market. Those sort of pointers where you see something that piques your own interest and you think, that's pretty cool, then I'd find out, well, okay, well, is that company listed? Can I buy shares in it?
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I started.
That's where you started. And how much did you start with?
Just small amounts of money. So exactly the same as we're talking, now that you can do 20, 30, 40 pounds. It was $50, $100. It was small amounts of money and you could just buy a little bit. You could buy £100 one time, and in a couple of weeks you could buy some more of the same stock or a different stock, depending on how you felt. And I suppose it's sort of learning by doing. I don't think I'm an expert by any means, but I still invest, I still punt, and I still love it. So I suppose that says something. And it's done really well for me. I've had some really good wins, and I've found that it's kept me really engaged with what's going on as well, not only in the areas in which I work, but more widely. It's kept me engaged and interested.
So you've had some good wins. Let's talk about that in just a moment. When you first started, of course, going back to the initial part of the journey, because I'm quite interested in this, Melissa, because this is the stage that I'm at now. I'm about to step foot into this world. So I'm like, okay, Melissa, how did you do it and what happened? Did you find that initially, did you lose money? I hear people saying this all the time. When I was first learning, this is what happened. Did that happen to you, or have you been on a roll? Were you on a roll initially?
Initially, because I was working in a time when it was sort of basically a boom market, so I did quite well at first. So that obviously gives you some more courage. Sometimes that's not always a good thing, because you can become overconfident. So a few losses at the beginning aren't necessarily such a bad thing. And actually, this is not a foolproof guide to making money in markets. This is sort of the process. And so again, I sort of come back to, well, did I win or did I lose? Well, I started and I had some wins. The hardest thing is to sell a share if it starts to go the wrong way. It's very easy to think, oh no, it'll come right. And then you have to make your own assessment. Well, maybe I should actually take that money out of that investment and put it into something else. So this is probably, we might be sort of rushing into the complexities too much here about share trading. But what's occurred to me when you said you're interested in now, what does this mean for you? The huge difference between now and nearly 30 years ago is that you can trade on an app. So in those days, I would have to ring someone to place an order. And if I was inexperienced, that can be a bit confronting because you think, oh, I'm not going to use the right words, or, I'm going to sound really stupid or naive, or, so that would be a barrier to me picking up the phone, is not really wanting to put myself out there. The great thing now is we're app based. So we can pick up our phone, open our app, as long as we've opened our account. So have you opened your account?
I haven't.
Oh,
No
no.
ID with me on the day. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to wait until I've had this chat with Melissa. I'm going
Okay.
to pick your brains. I'm going to learn a little bit more about what to do. And then I'm going to embark on my first step.
Okay. So next time we speak, I'm going to say, have you opened your app? So
I'm going to say yes, of course.
You are going to say yes. So this is the great thing, is today you can open your app and you can dial up a share. Dial up. See, that shows you how old I am. You can, type in, and you don't even have, so each share that is listed on the stock exchange will have what's called a ticker, which is a few letters which represent that share. So you don't always have to be dealing in the full name of the stock.
Right.
But on the apps, you can either put in the ticker if you know it, or you can write in the full name of the company, and then that will come up and it will give you some information about the company, and it will tell you what the share price is. It'll probably tell you what the 12-month low that share traded at. It'll probably tell you the 12-month high that share traded at. So you'll immediately be able to say, well, okay, the low of the year was 10p, the high of the year was $1. It's currently, I can buy £50 worth of shares at 15p, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Doink. And that's it.
That's it. It's as simple as
that's it. And then you get the exciting thing, which is a contract note. So on your email, the trade will go through, and then on your email, you'll receive an email saying you have bought this many shares at this price. And then that's all held electronically on your app. So it will show you then you can open your app and it will show you your portfolio. So it will say, here's what you hold, here's what you bought it at, here's the current price, so here's the current value. And then when you do your tax return, then that information is just there and you just can send that, put it on your tax return, or if you use someone to do your tax, you just send them that and then they incorporate all of that.
Interesting. So when you're saying that there's an app, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to, for myself, I don't need to pick up the phone, find a broker. I can do it online now. I can register everything. Is there many different apps? Is there a certain type of app that you go for? Of course, we saw this stand at the event that we were at the Aquis event that we were at. This is such a vast area.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there, especially, and I'm just gonna mention this, but we won't step into this just yet. Of course, it's crypto and everything is also out as well. It to be a bit of a minefield, which app, where, and how do you do it?
Yep. So most of the stockbroking firms now have an online platform and have an app. So IG is one, and many of the other companies. So if you even Googled, I won't do it now because I don't have my glasses on, as we discussed earlier. If I was to Google open a broking account to trade shares on the London Stock Exchange, then you would come up with a whole list. And pretty quickly, you would be able to work out just by reading them that they are all stand-up companies. And there are lots of familiar names. Am I allowed to mention names on here?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's many, we would normally say other brands are available. In this case, other companies are available. Yeah. So, it's fine. There's many different ones, as we've just mentioned, IG as well. And if you could just give us a few others as well, so that there's...
So Barclays have a good online platform, and AJ Bell also have a good online platform. So there's two examples. AJ Bell might be a brand name that people haven't heard of. Barclays is probably a brand name people have heard of. So they're probably good examples. Both of them have online trading capability.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So maybe.
And we can Google, we can find many different ones there. But I mean, you mentioned that you've had some big wins. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Can you maybe share a story or two with us of maybe referring back to when it was and what happened?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to name the name of the company, but I had some shares in a mining company that went very, very well. And I remember saying to my stockbroker, oh my God, should I keep holding these shares or should I sell because they're doing so well? I think that becomes a problem, is if something's doing really, really well, you're not quite sure. I suppose that's when greed, you get greed. You just think, well, if this goes higher, I'm going to, be cross with myself for selling them. And then I remember an old adage, someone said, no one ever went broke making a profit. So, nothing wrong with just selling some shares and saying, you know what, I made some money, that's really good. And now I can go again or reinvest that money or spend some of it, whatever.
So I can imagine, Melissa, it may be like, person may even get like FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, what if I pull this out now and then it goes up so much more? Am I going to miss that? So, yeah.
Well, you don't have to sell all your shares. And that's, because you have a live platform on your app, when you open your account, you'll be able to see at any one time. You can say, well, I could sell some of my shares, but not all of them. So I can maybe take some money off the table, as we would say. And then maybe I want that money to buy a gift or whatever, or just because then I feel good and safe that I've made some money and banked it. So you don't have to sell everything. So you can say, well, I'll sell some, and then I actually still really like what they're doing. I still really want to hold this stock. Okay, there's still risk, but I'm happy to be there. So yeah, you don't have to sell all. And just, to finish that story, so I said to my stockbroker, what do I do? And he said, you must sell some shares every day. And then at the end of the day, chastise yourself for not having sold more. So that was probably my big win. He was just, the market is, and sometimes this happens, the market just runs, and it can be on a specific stock or it can be thematic. So, for example, recently when there's been talk of Trump maybe winning the presidency to Trump winning the presidency, companies involved in the crypto Bitcoin space, a lot of them have really gone for a run.
Yeah.
So that would have been something that you might, if you were inclined, you might have punted crypto stocks and said, well, I think that if Trump gets in, there's going to be a lot of excitement around that space. So what are the listed companies in doing things in crypto? Read up on them and then choose one or a couple. You don't have to only choose one.
Yeah.
A couple. So
Wonderful.
again, I'm very nervous about not giving investment advice.
Of course. Well, we're not here to give investment advice. What we're here to do is talk about your journey. And for it, really, this is about us hearing about you, Melissa, and how you did it, and talking to us about what you do. So you've had your highs. Have you experienced any major lows when it comes to investing?
Oh yeah, I've been wiped out. I've been wiped out on specific stocks where I've thought, okay, I really like what they're doing. I think it's going to go really well, and it's been a complete disaster.
Right.
And I've lost everything. So yeah. And they sit. The thing is, if they're delisted, so sometimes a share will perform so badly and the company basically goes broke. So it goes off the boards. And then if you're lucky, you might get bits of paper or information about the company. But otherwise, it sort of goes pretty much close to nothing. It still sits there. It's still listed. And it's there as a constant reminder on your app that you made a bad investment or a bad decision. But then, that's probably quite healthy too, isn't it? It's sort of, I think, it's for me anyway, it's always been really important to not sort of get carried away too much and to remember, that if this was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
But it can be a lot of fun and it can be very lucrative. So, but easy isn't probably one of them unless you have unless you're very lucky early on. And
yes,
if you are.
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, do you know what? I'm going to address the elephant in the room right now. As you know, at the event as well, when we were at the Aquis event, we were in a room mainly male dominated. There was a few women there, but it was mainly male dominated. The industry seems to be, when I'm coming across investors, mainly men. In fact, I would go as far as saying you're the first woman that I've had such an in-depth conversation with, and it's been so inspiring in terms of, you know what, we need to invest. So why do you think those barriers are there? Why do you think there's not more women coming forward and investing in their own right?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. We have been so vocal about self-care, but not about financial self-care. So I don't understand why that idea of self-care hasn't really spread into investing, and why we don't see more women at events like that. It's also really hard to understand, given there is so much content now available online. So you and I can have this conversation online, and any woman can watch it anywhere at any time. So whilst historically, you know, the city was the city, so you had to be in the city. So if you were working somewhere else, or you were at home looking after kids or doing home-based work, you didn't have access to that world. That's no longer true. So much content about companies is now online. And it really has only hit me recently with the work that we're doing in endometriosis.
Yes.
You know, that why aren't there women? I kind of, when I was doing mining, I have to admit, I didn't think about it because, rightly or wrongly, it was sort of a male world. It didn't really occur to me. But now when I'm talking about women's health a lot, why there aren't more women saying, right, I want to know more about what you're doing. Tell me about this bit. Tell me about that bit. I would like to buy some shares or whatever.
Yeah. An interesting point that you've made, because of course endometriosis is a condition that affects a lot of women, and it almost be, in fact, it can be debilitating. It can have a major effect on quality of life. So as you're saying, you know, you are here working on stage 2 clinical trials for a solution, for a medicine that can help with that. And yet, do you find that you've got more majority of male investors? And would you say that they are investing because they understand the condition, or do you think they're investing because they're looking at the market value here, they're looking at the potential of the company and looking at the potential returns?
It's actually a really interesting mixture. So one of the early discussions we had was actually in person with a broking team in London. And one of the guys around the table, we were in a small meeting room, and I went through the story, and I was talking about endometriosis, and, you know, you sort of get used to trotting out the statistics. And then this bloke across the table sort of had this sort of very distressed look, would be the best way to describe it. And when I stopped and said, well, are there any questions? He said, it's not a question. He said, but my sister had to have a hysterectomy and hasn't been able to have children because of endometriosis. So I'm really interested in what you're doing. So that was a man saying, I get it, and this is really important. And yes, there's money to be made. So, you know, those three things sort of go together. With a lot of the other men, and you know, it's my pet story, is I will be sitting on the sofa on a Saturday night watching a movie, and my WhatsApp will go ping, and it'll be some guy, a bloke from an investing group that I know of. We have a group that follows Ananda very, very closely. There's about 50 or 60 guys on a WhatsApp chat. Actually, I think it's a Telegram chat, and they discuss what we're doing. And so one of the guys will message me and say, I have just seen this report on the BBC about the cost of endometriosis. You know, it's so good that you're doing those trials. Or when do you think your trial will start? Or have you seen this piece of research that's just come out from some university about endometriosis treatments? And So that's when I started to think this is really weird. I've got men chasing me for updates, sending me research, championing our work and investing. And again, not large sums of money. This is the maybe £50 at the end of the month, every month type investing. And that was when, and that was really kind of part of what maybe has led to us having these conversations, is just not being able to fathom it. Why are there not women chasing me for answers? Why are there not women saying to me, Melissa, this is amazing, or not? They can tell me they don't like what I'm doing, but, explain to me what you're doing. I'd like to buy some shares. I trade shares. I'm going to buy some shares in your company. They don't even have to tell me they're doing that. But I have not been able to resolve this situation. And it doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Coming from my own personal point of view, of course, having just stepped into this world earlier this year when I started working for Stockbox, I think it would be down to lack of knowledge, which is why I think conversations like this are so important to break down those barriers, because today you've broken down a very important barrier for me personally of just simplifying how to do it.
Yes.
And just, the sharing of the concept of, something that may be obvious to people that are already investing, but that, hey, you know what, you just need an app. You need a broker's account. You need to have a bank account that links to that. And you don't need a large amount to start.
Yeah.
It's just about getting started. So they're the key points that I've taken away from you today, Melissa. And I would like to continue this conversation with you in the new year and let you know about how I'm doing as well. How I get on with my progress.
Don't call me until you've got your app downloaded.
It will be there. It will be there for the next time that we talk. But I would like to continue, this chat with you in the new year. And I would also invite viewers that are watching right now to, if you've got questions, if you've got feedback, we would love to hear from yourself. Have you found this to be helpful? Are you perhaps listening or watching this right now and thinking, do you know what, this is inspiring me to start my own investing journey? If it is, we definitely want to hear from you. Do get in touch with us and let us know your thoughts and how it's gone for you and how you've started. Or maybe you're already an investor. Maybe you're watching this right now and thinking, yes, I have been on this investing journey and I would like to add to this. This was my experience. Get in touch with myself, Pam, and Melissa here at Stockbox, and we would love to continue this in the new year. Melissa, are you happy to come back on and continue to speak to us?
I would love to. I think we could speak a lot and have a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Melissa, on that note, I think this is a great place to leave it for today. And I look forward to speaking to you in 2025. That's so even the sound of that, it's like 2025. How did that happen? We're almost there. So.
Yeah.
Just before you go though, Melissa, a final point is what happens over the Christmas period with the markets? People starting to invest or?
Yeah. The markets are generally open and your app will tell you when the market is closed. So if the market is closed, and the market tends to be only closed on the weekends and on sort of regulated public holidays, if you like. The rest of the time it's open. Some days it will close a little bit early, depending, but mostly open. That's the point of markets, is we have to be able to trade our shares.
That's great. That's great. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today at Stockbox. And I do wish you a wonderful festive season and look forward to speaking to you again in the new year.
You too, and thank you.